Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, where you get concrete tools for mindset work, my best tips for lowering your anxiety. And you also hear funny and encouraging stories from me and others who have stories to share. Around here, you'll discover the easy way to stop overthinking, to get rid of self doubt, and finally embrace a calmer, more confident you. I am Olga, your host, a former therapist, a life coach, wife, blissfully an IVF mother, and a coffee lover. I'm excited that you tune in today, and I'm honored to be on the journey with you. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I'm Olga, your host, and I'm very excited to have this podcast with you. As I was recording the last episode, I was talking about an experience I had with a diagnosis and how I dealt with it. And as I've had several clients with health anxiety, and even without health anxiety, with just anxiety, and the conversation of what doctors tell us and what professionals tell us has always come up as something that we sometimes have a hard time separating from. And sometimes when we're given a diagnosis, we sort of really, truly identify with it. And it changes a bit our own identity and how we feel about ourselves. And I want to spend some time talking about how we're not our diagnosis, how we can absolutely not let it define us. And I also feel that this conversation could be really helpful to the fertility community if you're listening, because I think that so often we get so focused on giving power to our fertility diagnosis or lack of diagnosis. And in that process, we lose so much trust in the professionals and physicians that are helping us along our journey. So whether you are a fertility seeking human, or you are just anybody with a diagnosis, and you want to learn ways in which you can choose to not identify with your diagnosis, this episode is for you. So let's dive in. So I think I would like to start by telling you, in case you missed the last episode, a little bit about, actually, I'm going to tell you more than what I said at the last episode I recorded, about my experience with medicine and with doctors and with diagnosis. And actually, just the other day, I was driving with my mother-in-law, and she was listening to a radio station where there was this preacher that she likes to listen to, whose name I can't remember. I was just trying to Google that before jumping in here, but I couldn't find it. And he was saying how his 96-year-old mother had been diagnosed with, I don't know what it was, diabetes, something along those lines. And when the doctor told her, she refused the diagnosis and says, "No, I am not. I am not subscribing to that diagnosis. Thank you very much." And so she didn't. And he says that months later, they do test for it. I don't remember what the diagnosis was, but the case is that she refused to believe the diagnosis. She said, "No, those were somebody else's words, not my own." And she was healed. So it was obviously part of his preaching moment. He was making a point. I don't actually know that his mom was healed by it. And I'm not suggesting that we don't identify with our diagnosis and suddenly we're healed. That is not at all what I'm saying. But I love the point that he was trying to make, that we live our life based on what we choose to believe, and having a diagnosis can sometimes shape how we see ourselves. And suddenly we begin to treat ourselves differently and opt out of things or do things that are not necessary, that are not keeping us healthier necessarily, because we've identified with that belief that we are no longer healthy. So I want us to talk about how to not identify with our diagnosis. But I want to start by telling you a little bit about my own personal story. When I was 10 years old, I almost died. I had a very simple appendicitis, but it nearly killed me. So it wasn't so simple. it would have been simple if doctor number 1, 2, or 3 would have diagnosed it when my mom took me to the doctors when I was in a lot of pain. And all 3 doctors concluded that I had colitis, which is inflammation of the colon, which to my mom made sense because her mom used to suffer from it. She used to suffer from it. She just thought I was perhaps too young to go through it, but it made sense to her. And they all misdiagnosed me. I continued to be in a lot of pain, and eventually I went into septic shock. So my entire body was covered by the infection. My appendix had burst, so the colon had burst. So it was a mess. 3 days after my colon had burst, finally my mom decides to take me to a hospital, a different hospital, a 4th diagnosis, and this time I was rushed to surgery because they properly diagnosed me. And I left that surgery to be in a medically induced coma. And I was in that state of a coma for 10 days till I woke up, and then my lungs were filled with water, and I was 60% dead. 60% of my organs were quote unquote dead, not working, not functioning. Among those were my kidneys, my lungs, and I don't know what else wasn't working, but 60% of them weren't. My blood was highly infected. My brain was kept intact. The infection never rise to the brain, which was great. And the doctors didn't really give me much of an option to live. They told my parents to essentially say goodbye to me and enjoy my last few days on Earth because I was leaving. They couldn't imagine that I would heal. I don't know that I heard those words or not, but I decided that I wanted to live. And I was 10, so everybody sugarcoated, I think, my condition, but I knew how sick I felt. I knew how hard I was fighting. Every breath, every inhale, every day, I could tell my body was dying. I, in fact, said that. At that young age, I told my mom, I know I'm dying. It was evident to me that I was dying, but I decided not to. Again, this is my own personal story. I'm not saying that deciding not to die heals anybody. It wasn't my time, paired with me not wanting to subscribe to that death sentence. And obviously, the rest of the story, you can tell I lived. I am here. I went to celebrate my 11th birthday at the hospital in intensive care. And I've recently celebrated my 39th birthday, which nobody thought I would. Nobody thought I would make it to the 11th birthday, which was still when I was in intensive care. So that was a sign for me. From that moment on, anything that could have possibly gone wrong with my body went wrong. So while they'll give me one med to take care of the lungs then filled up with water. Where when they would give me something for the kidneys, then the liver didn't like it, and so on and so forth. It was a very, very difficult recovery, but I made it. There was a lot of consistency, persistence, and I realized that my willpower had something to do with my health. And even though I was so young, I mixed it 2 things. Now, once I recovered from that, everybody, and I mean everyone, my family, my parents, friends, my school teachers called me the miracle. There comes the miracle. She's a miracle. And everybody, I come from a very Catholic country, so they truly believe in miracles and they believe in everything happens for a reason. So the thing that everyone was telling me regularly was, God gave you a second opportunity to stay alive, and it must be because you came to this world to do something phenomenal. And I believe that. That made me feel so good. I'm like, yes, I'm here to make something great happen. And that's why I was given a second opportunity. What they didn't realize happened to me at that moment is that they gave me permission to create a different reality about myself. So rather than thinking of this weak child growing up who had all kinds of issues, my lungs never went back to being the same. Even to this date, I definitely know that my lung capacity is not what it could be. And rather than identifying myself with, whatever perceptions I could have had about being, more, I don't know, I want to say like prone to health issues, I decided to go with what everybody was telling me and thinking, no, I'm super powerful. I am the girl who came back from the death, basically. I am the girl who's here to do something wonderful, and that I chose to stay. My mom jokingly also around that time said that I am so stubborn that death wanted nothing to do with me. That death was like, oh my God, you can keep her. She's so stubborn. She wants to stay alive. And that also, my mom doesn't know, but that also became fuel for me. I'm like, that's right. Being stubborn can actually be really helpful to me. I put it to good use. And so, long story short, that was a significant era of my childhood that taught me two things. Diagnoses are not a definition of the human. A diagnosis is a photo, a picture of my body at that moment in time, and anything and everything can change. And then I realized the power of the mind and how we as humans can identify with the illness, with the condition, or we can notice all the other parts of our body that are still healthy and have a solid, strong mind that allow us to overcome the parts of our body that are not as healthy in that moment in time. And I think also the notion that mindfulness has taught me in adulthood that nothing is permanent has allowed me to, in the latest years with the diagnosis of infertility, not let that diagnosis either become my permanent status. It's flowing, and I was able to conceive a baby regardless of what a doctor told me, and not one, several doctors told me it wouldn't be possible. So I hope you see where I'm going, but I wanted to give some background as to why I feel so strongly about this idea of not identifying with our diagnosis. I know that we hear that notion often, and on paper sounds great, but I wanted you to hear it from me and know my personal experience with health. It's not been an easy ride for me by any stretch, and I wouldn't change a thing. I would still be thinking not identifying with my diagnosis has been helpful. I'm going to move you along 5 years after that incident. I'm 15. I'm crossing a street with my sister. I'm not going to lie, I got distracted because there was a cute guy standing on my side of the road. My sister crossed the street and I didn't notice. And by the time I noticed, she waved at me the motion of come over here. And I looked, and there was a bus stopped on the road getting passengers in. And I didn't think there was enough space between the bus and the other side of the road for cars to pass. But obviously that was a miscalculation. And so I decided to run fast to cross the street before the bus started going again. You can hear where I'm going with this. I'm running as fast as I can, and there is a car passing the bus as fast as he can. And we happen to run into each other. Neither one of us saw the other coming. So I hit a car that is going 80 kilometers an hour, and I fly out. I was lucky. I had a backpack full of textbooks. I was going to see a friend to study. And that backpack served as the space between my head and the floor. Like it stopped my head from hitting the ground, because I would probably not be here telling you that story. As I'm I don't know why I'm telling all this long story, but I just think it's fun that I have an opportunity to tell these stories. As my sister's are screaming, obviously in panic because she's seen now this happening in front of her eyes, a voice says, "Don't worry, I am a doctor." Can you believe that crossing the street on the other side, there was a doctor who saw the accident happening? Like, I don't know if you believe in angels, but this was a walking angel on earth. He had seen the accident, so he was the first at the scene. He was able to check my body out. And he told me, "You have a broken leg, but you will be okay." And I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling any pain by now. I'm actually quite confused because I never saw the car coming. And I think that there was a lapsus there in my mind where I just was trying to comprehend what happened. Then my sister tells me, "A car hit you." And I'm like, okay, But this guy told me I have a broken leg and I'm fine and I'm still feeling no pain. And these people are growling. So he tells people who are like on the street walking by, stopping to see what they can do. He instructs them as to how to grab me to move me to the sidewalk. And so they do that. And that's when my panic came, because I could see these hands touching my body. I could feel the ones touching my arms and like my rib cage, but I didn't feel anything from the waist down. So obviously, my anxious mind put two and two together. A car just hit me. He said I have a broken leg, but really I don't feel anything. And I started screaming, I don't feel my legs. He explained to me that the body will do that when you have an injury. It kind of like numbs your pain initially. Well, don't worry, the pain woke up within seconds and it was intense. I broke two of the bones in my right leg and they displaced from each other once broken, about 5 fingers apart. So I had one leg longer than the other one, and it didn't break the skin. The bones didn't break the skin, thankfully, but very close to. Long story short, I go for emergency surgery. I get surgery. I need pins and bolts and all kinds of stuff on that leg of mine. And the next day when I'm still at the hospital, the doctor comes to see me and tells me, listen, it's going to take a full year for you to recover. The way you broke your leg is very significant and you will not recover sooner than a year. And in fact, you're going to have to wear crutches for 6 months minimum. I don't know you, but what 15-year-old wants to be wearing crutches for 6 months and unable to do all the things that she likes doing for a full year? So once again, I was stubborn and I listened to what he had to say. I'm like, okay, but just out of curiosity, what could make my progress go by faster? And he said, well, you have to be very consistent with your physio and well, your leg will heal in its own time. Magic words. The leg will heal in its own time. But you just told me it takes a year. So that means I get to manifest whatever I want with my own health. Again, I did not subscribe to what the plan is, what they know science has said. And I did what I wanted and needed to do. So sure enough, I went to physio, and if physio was 1 hour, I would stay an extra hour. And I went religiously and I did the exercises that hurt like crazy. And I am very independent, and I got easily annoyed at the fact that I couldn't walk and hold a glass of water, that I always needed to ask for help because my hands were busy with the crutches that I needed to walk. So I started baby steps, and I started like trying to do 2-3 steps without the crutches in my bedroom as soon as I woke up. And that was crazy and painful and difficult. But I would take those 3 steps. And then the next day I would take 4. And the next day I would take 5. I did not wear crutches 3 months after the accident had happened. I did not walk fine. I walked funny. It was a funny walk. Like I used to lift my entire hips because my knee wouldn't bend. But I didn't care. I took looking funny over independence, and I did it. And so I came to my checkup, and he couldn't believe that I was like being so stubborn and not using the crutches. Long story short, guys, 6 months after, I was back to almost normal. Not entirely. Obviously, it does take a very long time for the calluses around the bone to grow. So I would believe that probably took a year. But I told myself, I get to heal when I decide. I saw people coming to my physiotherapy that until the year was up, or whatever number they were given by their doctors, until that day came up, they did not feel any better. It was like they grabbed the doctor's words, and they told themselves, okay, when is the year marked? June 12th? Okay, on June 12th of 2022, I will feel better, not before. And they were shocked that I was doing better, and they almost like felt like my injury maybe wasn't as bad. I had learned previously that I had the power to heal, that I had the power to, at the very least, decide what would happen with my mind while my body was trying to heal. And if in that process I could fasten anything, or I could detach from the pain or the condition, all power to that. So that was like my second experience with it. When I ask you guys to not identify with your diagnosis, that's exactly what I mean. Did I still struggle? Did I still have to like concentrate to make sure that my ligaments, like that I wasn't injuring my ligaments? Could I wear high heels? I was still taking all the care that I needed to on that broken leg, like I did years before to save my life. But I am talking about not letting somebody's opinion, just because they wear a white coat and because they have years of experience and they're experts and professionals, let them decide what happens inside my body and in my mind. That belongs to me. I took full on responsibility of what was in my hands to be responsible for. I decided, I hear your opinion, but that's somebody's opinion and respected opinion. I trusted my doctors. I feel that, and especially later when I was diagnosed with unexplained infertility, I feel that sometimes as patients, and more now so that we have access to Google diagnosis, that we want to do our own research and that we spend a lot less time trusting the experts. I am full force for trusting the experts, all of them. Whether you have a holistic doctor, a traditional medicine doctor, it does not matter. Just trust them. And if you don't trust them, find the ones that you can trust so that you can be the patient and they can be the doctors. I feel that sometimes in this world, when we can just mistrust everyone, we try to control outcomes. And they give us a diagnosis that we don't like. And what we try to do is control them and their diagnosis and what they're doing and how they're doing it by, like I said, Googling and saying, well, there's other alternatives. And this is how other people have been diagnosed. And, we can just be so mistrusting that what ends up happening is we increase our anxiety and we forget that we are in full power, that we are co-healing with these doctors, whoever they are, that they have only so much of the responsibility, but it is our responsibility to be 100% committed to our healing. And in that process, to trust that professionals that are also 100% committed in our same goal and that want the same results for us will show up in our life. From the day that I was in intensive care when I was a little girl to the day I gave birth to my son, it's been 30 years have gone by between all of those incidents. Every single human I've met in those journeys show me human quality, somebody who wanted to help, somebody who were doing their best. And those who did not, I ruled out. I thanked them for their service and I ruled them out. I went looking for the ones who had my best interests at heart, who were 100% committed. And that's how I am a bit in coaching. I find that I have such a rigorous process to accept people into my coaching programs because I only want to work with people who are 100% committed in their results, in their progress, because I know me and I am going to be 100% committed in the results, in them getting the outcome that they desire. That's my job. I don't have the attitude that maybe some physicians and some professionals have that say, well, all I do is tell them like what I can do, and then the rest is entirely up to them. I do think that there is a shared responsibility, and I take responsibility of that, just like I do when I am the patient, when I am the person being coached. It's not just, well, I'll let my coach make it happen. Like I am 100% team tested. So when you are faced with a diagnosis, I want you to come back to that responsibility, to own 100% of your responsibility, which does not mean you play doctor, which does not mean you mistrust people. But if you do, change them till you find the people that your team that you can feel supported by and that you can trust, that can actually make you feel that you are important and that your desire and goal is equally important, but you can also disagree with them. And remember that you are in charge of your health. At the end of the day, a diagnosis does not change your name or your personality. It is a photo of your body at that moment in time, even if you do get diagnosed with a chronic condition, even if you get diagnosed with a terminal condition, mindset can change the experience. It might not change your health status, but it changes the experience. And I can share 2 experiences of people diagnosed with terminal conditions where their mindset made them come to the end of their life feeling peaceful and happy and having enjoyed as much as they could, every moment towards the end of their life, just in so much appreciation of what they have experienced, what life they had. And I think that is so powerful, that we come to the conclusion time after time that a diagnosis is simply a photo of our body at that moment, and that we get to choose how we want to co-heal with the professionals around us, and how we let this diagnosis kind of be a part of our life story, but not who we are. We are not our thoughts. We are not our diagnosis. Okay. Again, diagnosis is no different than you saying, I am anxious today. Okay, that's a photo of you at this moment. But it could change. And if it cannot be changed, then you can begin to think about, how could I think of this diagnosis that sides with me, that doesn't steal my identity as I know it, but it is me at in this phase at this moment. This is a call of responsibility. This is a call for you to CEO your health, for you to say, regardless of what my health status is, I have my mindset and I can choose to say how important this is to me, and how can I take charge of it, of what I can. And sometimes, like when I got diagnosed with unexplained infertility, I didn't have control over the diagnosis, the treatment plan. None of that was in my hands, or the success, the potential pregnancy. But what was in my hands, I did it. I went to see as many professionals as I could. I got in my hands the best possible supplements that I could take. I cleaned my diet to one that was fertility friendly. I cleaned my home with products from shampoo to floor cleaners that were fertility friendly. And lastly, I took charge over my emotions and my mental health. I noticed what was going on with my mind and my emotions as I was experiencing life without a child, and that being the opposite of what I wanted. And I took charge of that. I put a stop to my limiting beliefs that said that I was never going to become a mom. I put a stop to the mean voice that doubted my abilities. And I did my miles. I went where I needed to go, even though it was away from my city, to get the treatments where the best doctors were, where the best potential treatments were. And I put all of what was in my hands to do, I did it. And I always told myself, even if I end without my own biological child in my arms, I will end also with the gratification, the reward that I've done everything in my power, that I took 100% responsibility over my diagnosis, my circumstances. I did not let this define me. I never walk away saying, I'm infertile. That's why my business is called Fertility Seeker, because I was seeking to be fertile. And that sounded better to me than infertile, unexplained infertility. So I want to leave you with that, just food for thought. What is currently your attitude towards any diagnosis you might have, including anxiety or depression? I find especially towards mental health, we tend to really let that shape our identity. And if you don't like that attitude you're having, how can having heard this podcast influence you differently? How could you choose when and how you feel better? I'll leave you with that little story. When a doctor told me that I couldn't have my own biological children, and that he didn't think I was a good candidate for IVF because we had just had one that didn't work. I walk out of that office. I thank him. I had a conversation with myself, like within seconds. I said to myself, not this doctor and not anyone in the world will tell me when and how I become a mother. That's my choice. I get to decide that, and I will do what I can. And I'm telling you, I went to work, and Mateo is here, and Mateo is a product of my perseverance, but also a product of not having taken that doctor's opinion, which again, doctors follow a process and a protocol. And if you don't fit into that protocol, they do what they need to do, which is to cover their backs, as they should. They can't make you promises that they don't know are possible. So I get it. I will never, ever, ever, ever think that that doctor was ill-intended. He gave me a professional opinion. I just chose to disagree with it and not let that become my truth. And thankfully, I didn't. And I did it right away. As soon as those words were said to me, I rejected them. By doing what? Taking responsibility and saying, no, I get to choose how and when I become a mother. Even though realistically, I've been wanting to be a mother for a long time by the time he said that, but I did not let his words become my truth. So I hope you find it helpful for whatever it's worth, especially if you do have a diagnosis of any kind of mental health condition. I think that it's so important that we take charge and that we hear it, we understand it, and then we look for, what am I going to do about it? All right. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Talk to you guys soon. Take charge of your health. It is worth it. And do not identify with a photo that is being taken of you at a moment in time. It's just one face of you. It's not who you are. I'm sending you all of my love, and I'll talk to you guys soon.